Okay, we'll call our meeting to order and we'll rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Julie, you want to take the roll call?
Mike Hobson.
Here.
Marilyn Early.
Here.
Deborah Nelson.
Here.
Dawn Bannon.
Here.
Ann Sweaty.
Here.
Michelle Blythe.
Here.
Heather Moser.
Here.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Second. Question.
In favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, move into our workshop items this evening. And first up is the resolution adopting the 2022 Comprehensive Plan final docket. And Amy Rusco is here.
Before Amy starts, I'll just say a couple of words because this doesn't come up all the time. We do the annual docket process, of course, annually, so once a year. All of our docket items are saved, and the docket closes the end of January each year. And then the CED with Planning Commission prepare those, and all the items that are proposed to be on the docket then come forward to council for consideration as a package. So that's where we're at tonight. What you're doing tonight is really looking at the overall package and approving that moving forward. That authorizes staff to spend time preparing those and working with the Planning Commission to put together a recommendation for each item. So each item that is on the docket tonight will come before you again for more of an in-depth discussion. So I just wanted to save you the time and concern that there isn't a lot of information here about each individual item, but that will be coming forward to you.
Thanks, Paul.
Sure.
So Amy, you want to tell us what we're approving this evening or next week?
You're on
You're
mute.
muted, Amy.
You're still mute.
I'm sorry, I thought I hit it off when Barb said that. So let me start over. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council, and thank you, Paul, for the great explanation there. So I'll kind of keep it brief and go along the lines of what Paul just said. There are two sections in our code under our amendments section under 2096 that allows the city to do a docket process for comprehensive plan amendments, zoning map changes, and development regulation changes. So when we know we have a lot of development regulations, we try to group them with the docket. Sometimes those come to you separately as well. But this year we are trying to get as much as we can onto the docket, which you have in front of you. The private citizens and the city itself can propose amendments to our plans. We had no citizen amendments come forward. So the two items you see on the docket are for the York Park rezone and for Title 20 Development Regulation Code amendments. And like Paul said, this is just approving the docket. This went through Planning Commission in March, and you have their findings of facts that they submitted with the packet recommending approval. And so if the final docket is approved, then we will be bringing back the rezone we have scheduled to come back in May if it's approved. And we have the zoning code amendments looking to come back to you in July for either approval or denial on either one of those. Do you have any questions regarding the docket items, or would you like me to go over either one of the docket items?
Mike has a question. Unmute yourself, Mike, and go ahead.
Okay, I noticed that what we're looking at on the docket tonight is a 0.56 acre parcel. And that's the house parcel, I'm assuming. Am I correct?
Yeah, that's
Yes.
correct.
So, and the whole park is, York Park is supposed to be 2 acres, is that correct? So I guess, that's what I've seen, that it's 2 acres for the York Park, is that correct?
I cannot say if that's correct or not. I can find that information out for you and get back to you, or I can do it right as we speak.
Yeah, I was just wondering if that 0.56 acre parcel that we're dealing with tonight is also part of the entire York Park, if that's part of the 2 acres or not.
So the 0.56 is the parcel that is up for the rezone. Then there's another, let's see, I think they're all 0.38. And then we have 3 parcels that are 0.38. So that is 1.14 acres will remain as park. And that's basically from that fence line that's already established to the west.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah, so the whole thing together is about 2 acres. When I see
Yes.
York Park is 2 acres, this is considered part of York Park. So
Correct.
tonight we're just dealing with the 0.56 acre part of it. And I just a quick question, why didn't you not include the entire park tonight?
Sure. So it's split into 4 parcels as it is. So we have a park developed on 3 of the 4 parcels. So the 3 did not come tonight because we're not looking at rezoning those. Those will remain in the public, semi-public, and owned by the city of Arlington. The 0.56 is the parcel that has come to council, I believe, once or twice before. I was not involved with it, but I believe it came back or came to you before for different densities than what is proposed right now. So it is the parcel with the house that's not being used currently for park space, and the garage or shed that's in the back that was used for storage by the city maintenance crew. And I don't know if it's still being used as that. So the city's looking at selling that parcel for future development to a private party.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I have one more question.
Sure.
It's the proposed zoning is for residential moderate density,
That's correct.
and that amounts to somewhere between 7 and 14 units per acre, I think, if I remember right.
You're making
and
me.
half of that.
Yep, you're making me jump here. Just a second.
Can I just remind Councilmember Hobson that what tonight we're doing is just approving that this plan would be something that the staff would spend time on to come back to you.
We'll come back
with
to
the
you
detail.
in greater detail.
Our mod is 7 to 11 dwelling units per acre.
Yeah, so it'd be half of that, about a little over half of that. So it'd be about 4 units. Okay,
Yep.
well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Amy on what's on the docket? Thank you, Amy. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
All right, thank you.
Right, our next item this evening is the 2022 Airport Runway 1634 Mill and Overlay Project. And Marty and Lorene are here to present to us this evening. Good evening.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yep.
Perfect. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. Tonight we're bringing the cab subject is the 2022 Airport Runway 1634 Mill and Overlay Project. This project was approved as part of the airport's biannual budget. It involves the following: design, construction, and construction administration services for the runway 1634 Mill and Overlay Project. Lakeside Industries Incorporated came in as the lowest bidder at $2,424,597.08. Staff contacted the references for the contractor, and the references were complimentary of their work. Lakeside's a very well-established paving company. So the staff is also requesting that City Council authorize the mayor to sign the professional services agreement with Dow as part of this cab as well, and not to exceed $201,051, and for the on-call engineer for the city of Arlington. Staff is requesting the City Council authorize the mayor and city attorney to sign the WashDOT Airport Grid or Airport Aid Grant offer and FAA grant offer subject to grant award for the 2022 Airport Runway 1634 Mill and Overlay Project. Now I'm happy to answer any of your questions.
Jen has a question.
Yeah, I have a question. So on the amount that was budgeted and everything, how much of that are you thinking that's going to be grant money? And when will you know if you actually get the grant money for it?
Yeah, 90% is grant money. We will be
Okay.
responsible for 10%. That grant should be granted to us within the next couple of weeks, we think. We're working on that, and there doesn't seem to be any holdup or problem associated with at this point. We've been working with the FAA on it.
Oh, okay, good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for Marty this evening? I think it's great that we're going to be able to get a grant for the rehabilitation of the runway.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Based on conservation planning. Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Okay, next up is an amendment to the police department staffing, and Jonathan Ventura and James Treefy should be here to take us through that. I'll let you guys pick whoever goes first. Good evening.
Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. James is the attorney amongst us, is probably a much more eloquent speaker than I am, but I'll hop in real quick and just bring a little bit of history to the request tonight. You might recall that in 2021, the council authorized the reestablishment of a lieutenant position within the police department, and the plan was to fund that position for 2022. And we are on course for establishing that plan. But one thing that has happened in the interim is the announcement of a retirement of our deputy chief, which some of you might have noticed the public announcement today. With some of the challenges we've been facing in the department, and knowing that this deputy chief retirement was coming with a little bit of notice, what the department is seeking to do is to appoint 2 lieutenants instead of the 1 for 2022, and suspending the backfilling of that deputy chief position. The reason being is we have more immediate needs closer to the patrol level right now, and some operational needs that having 2 lieutenants right now would be more beneficial than backfilling that deputy chief position. You may also recall that part of the establishment of that lieutenant position was that we were planning for the retirement of our current police services manager. And the establishment of a lieutenant was partly to help with our training, our accreditation, and our professional standards. It had been our goal all along to backfill that police services manager position with a police services supervisor, because some of those duties of the manager were going to be transferred to the lieutenant. So what we have here tonight, in essence, from my opinion, and again, James will clean this up for me, is we're looking to basically reclassify the lieutenant position to acknowledge that they're going to be taking on the duties of the deputy chief. And so we want that consideration in the pay scale. And secondly, asking for the assignment of a police services supervisor position back into the non-represented pay plan, in acknowledgement that we don't have intention, or we don't have any intention to backfill that police services manager because of that new lieutenant position. Will be taking on some of the higher functioning roles. And again, I apologize. I'll let James step in and clean that up a little bit for me.
Well, just to kind of pick up where the chief left off, we basically had come to council previously, just a few weeks ago, to assign the police lieutenant wage to the non-represented pay plan, in part that we could advertise internally for the position and then do testing, which we had completed earlier this year, forming a civil service promotional list. And we needed a wage assigned in order to go ahead and effectuate promotion. So we're on track to do that with the original lieutenant position. With the announcement of the retirement of the deputy chief, as the chief has stated, that'll take place April 1st. And the police services manager has now given notice that he'll, his last day, I believe, is May 4th. About a month later, it's time to go ahead and make those changes before we go ahead and start trying to fill the vacancies. So the proposal is to increase the pay grade assignment, not really reclassify the position, although they will be picking up some additional duties of the deputy chief's position, as well as some of the administrative duties of the services manager position that weren't contemplated when we initially assigned them on the pay grade at M. So it's proposed that they move to step N, which is just one step higher on the pay range. And as Chief stated, we need to establish a pay grade for supervisor position on the non-rep pay plan. It's proposed to assign that level pay grade H on the pay plan that is about a 15% amount over the new evidence position that we're currently in the recruitment process for, that was also previously authorized by council as part of the rollout of the body worn camera program. And happy to stand for any questions. This is budget neutral. We won't be filling the deputy chief's position at this time. And we also won't be going forward with the police services manager. So it's basically a reallocation of duties and reassignment to different position titles. And in the future, that we would potentially fill the deputy chief position in a different budget cycles. That would take place sometime in 2023 or thereafter. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'll take them in the order I saw them. Heather, and then Deborah, and then Dawn.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Chief Ventura. Hi, James. I have two questions. I'm curious why the police lieutenant, and maybe it was just market, James, why the police lieutenant came in at N instead of O?
That's a reflection of market and basically the add-on of those other kind of tertiary duties. So like initially when we comped it out at market, it was appropriately placed at M.
Okay.
And then just the one range basically because they're going to end up picking up some additional duties of the deputy chief and some additional duties from that police services manager position, which justifies the down class of that position. So you basically would have two lieutenants under this proposal, one primarily in charge of operations and one in charge of administration. And it kind of divides out those duties. And so because it's just picking up a portion of those, it was appropriate to comp that out at N. That's why it's proposed as such.
Thank you. Question number two is, the police services supervisor, will that still be an officer or more administrative?
It will not be an officer. It's a civil service position. It's not in the AFSCME bargaining unit. And so it has the same kind of character as the police services manager in terms of its assignment. It would be an exempt position, but just performing a lower level of duty. So some of the certification and some of the kind of higher level records oversight would be conducted at the lieutenant level now instead of that police services manager position. The supervisor would basically ensure staffing, oversee the functions on a day-to-day basis in the office, and potentially backfill in case of vacancy. So,
all right. Yep. Thank you.
All right, Deborah, go ahead.
Thank you. So my question is about, I heard you say, James, and I think Jonathan too, about the deputy chief position that we're not filling it at this time. So what my question is then, is that just going to be held as kind of a open position in the background for the next months or year or whatever we deem? And then part two of that is when we're counting, you know, at times I'll see like a list, like we have, say, 3 FTE positions in the police department, or, you know, I'm just making that number up, but would that be counted as an empty position, or is it just going to be kind of neutral?
The positions, the FTE count stays the same in the police department as proposed with this change. So we would leave the deputy chief position on the pay scale, but there wouldn't be an FTE opening for it until council took action on that. So okay. At some point in time in the future, the chief will have to come forward and either ask to take one of the lieutenant positions and move it to a deputy chief, or ask for an additional FTE to establish the deputy chief.
Okay, that was
either way, it'll take council action.
Okay, that was my concern, because I don't want it to look like we're just leaving this position open and not filling it if the public is looking into it. So thank you, that clarifies.
And the primary rationale is we're in the process of hiring additional staff. We do have several accepted offers. We had two new police officers, one lateral and one entry level candidate that started last week. We have another entry level that will start on the 1st, and then another entry level that's just awaiting final date of deployment in their position in the military. And we do have several entry and lateral candidates in background. So kind of depending on the hiring cadence and when people will get out of the academy, all that goes into the decision, as far as the administrative oversight and kind of the relative breadth and at what level to provide that oversight. And at this point, it makes more sense to run with two lieutenants in place in the department who are familiar with the department, kind of keep continuity of operations as opposed to bringing in, somebody new or doing a different recruitment for deputy chief. And, kind of evaluating that, like Paul said, from a budget standpoint later. So we'll have a better idea, coming into the next budget cycle about how best to kind of allocate staff within the department and kind of give you an update at that time where we're at for hiring.
I appreciate this. It seems like a very efficient way to do it. And I like it when there's movement coming from within our department, because I know we have excellent police to move up. So thank you.
Right, Don.
No, actually, both of my questions have been answered between Heather and Deborah's. So no, thank you.
Okay. Well, I'm very happy to see this plan come before council. I think this will give our excellent chief, some support in some of those administrative functions, and also allow, some of that hands-on training that the department's going to be very busy with a lot of new recruits in the pipeline. So I think that serves us well.
Very much so. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank
you, James. Okay, next up is the 2022 legislative update regarding the police reforms. Chief Ventura is going to take us through that.
All right, this is going to be kind of an executive summary. If I could share my screen for just a moment, give you some visuals to look at. This be better than looking at me, if that's okay. And let's see here, do this, share.
Oh, cute.
Well, that was public now. Can you guys see the screen now?
We can.
Okay, so this is police reform. This is just a real quick conversation about the 2022 legislative session update, specifically focusing on the police reform aspect. So in 2021, our state legislature enacted the most restrictive policing laws in the country. Couple that with the fact that Washington already has the lowest number of police officers per capita. The result has been the least amount of policing in the country, which we're seeing through high property crime rates and other trends that you only need to turn on the news to fully understand. So in 2021, the House Bills 1310 and 1054 in particular, along with the State v. Blake decision in the Supreme Court, significantly impeded local law enforcement's ability to do its job, and has actually driven officers away from pursuing law enforcement careers in Washington. And that is what's put so many departments, including ourselves, in the current staffing situations that we're in. So just a high level overview, this is our mission statement. The police department, in partnership with the community, provides exceptional law enforcement services to improve the quality of life in Arlington. And that's what it's all about, is improving that quality of life. And that's what our goal really is. So this is an executive summary. I'm not going to get real bad into the weeds, but I can sum it up in three phrases. It's the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that speaks for itself. So starting with the good, this session, House Bill 1719 restores law enforcement's authority to use some of the firearms that were banned for Washington peace officers in 2021. This includes shotguns and 40 millimeter launchers. Both are used in a variety of dangerous situations and mostly used to fire non-lethal or less lethal munitions. And this new restoration of this bill took effect on March 4th. House Bill 1735 defines de-escalation techniques while restoring authority for peace officers to use physical force to the extent necessary while using reasonable care in behavioral health circumstances, such as voluntary commitments or taking a child into protective custody, and for other civil community caretaking functions. For instance, assisting the fire and EMS when they're dealing with behavioral health subjects, or assisting the county designated mental health professional when they're taking somebody in for involuntary treatment. In 2021, House Bill 1310 eliminated law enforcement's authority to physically detain individuals only suspected of committing crimes. Since it became effective last July, suspected criminals could simply walk away from investigative detentions. This had a direct adverse impact on public safety. Thankfully, the legislature corrected this with House Bill 2037, which now allows peace officers to use physical force to prevent someone from fleeing a lawful temporary investigative detention after having information the subject that's going to be detained, after they advise that subject they're not free to leave. And this took effect on March 17th. This is also frequently referred to as Terry stops. So prior to this, we would see DV situations where we come in and we're trying to figure out what the situation is. Both parties simply could just walk away and refuse to cooperate, even though we knew that a crime had occurred. Or this is where they push out the TVs at Walmart. We could not stop them from fleeing the scene at that particular time until we developed probable cause to make an arrest, which is very difficult to do when you're the first officer on scene. It usually takes some investigation and some amount of time. So this was one of the most challenging part of the legislation that we dealt with. And then this is kind of more of a side note, but Senate House Bill 1701 increased the left to retirement multiplier from 2% to 2.5% for years 15 to 25 for peace officer service. What that means is that it's an improvement to officers' retirement plans for those officers that work between the years 15 and 25 years, which is great for the officers. It's bad for me as the chief because it also incentivizes people to leave sooner than they may have otherwise left. It's not a rags to riches stories, but it is about 5% more in retirement for somebody who retires at 25 years of service. So that will have some effect on officers leaving the scene or leaving the profession. And then finally, this is the part that I least would like to talk about, and this is the bad, well, and the ugly for that matter. But in February 2021, State v. Blake decision struck down Washington's simple possession drug law. This, you may remember, I've given briefings in the past, became known as the these aren't my pants defense, when we would take someone into custody and find drugs on their possession. Basically, this was a court decision that invalidated the law for being in possession of drugs. The legislature had the opportunity to correct the law, and it could have been as simple as inserting the word knowingly into the previous law, that the subject knowingly was in possession of those drugs. But rather than make that simple correction, it got very convoluted. And so rather than make the correction, the legislature instead essentially legalized drug paraphernalia and downgraded all felony possessions to misdemeanor possessions, and then further instituted a requirement that we make referrals for people to get drug treatment prior to physically taking them into custody or making a physical arrest. In order to accomplish that, we start documenting our contacts internally, and the state came up with a 800 number for each county to hand out to people that are in need of those services. So one of the things that's interesting is I went to a meeting recently to find how often that 800 number had been actually used. And what we found out is that since the initiation of this 800 number, there's only been 4 people called the phone number. And the ironic thing is none of them were law enforcement referrals. They were people that found out about the number on their own and decided to call it. So we're not seeing the desired effect that we wanted to see. And this is not to say that all possession of drugs is legal, but if we still find somebody that is like dealing large quantities, and we have multiple sales and transactions, or we find drug labs, there can still be some accountability there. But on the level that we deal with on the street, even somebody in of themselves who has a large quantity of drugs could just say, well, I'm a heavy user, and this is all for personal possession. So there is something to pay attention to on this is when this new law passed, basically the legislator said that it sunsets on July 1st of 2023. So if there is not a permanent change or permanent change to the law presented, it will default back to the State versus Blake decision, which essentially totally legalizes drugs in Washington state. And then I guess what's worse than the bad for me is the ugly. Last year, House Bill 1054 significantly changed the requirements on all vehicle pursuits by law enforcement, virtually eliminating pursuits in Washington. The legal standard requires that the statute required by statute now make it nearly impossible for officers to comply. This has resulted in many more criminals avoiding capture by simply driving away from crimes. So in 2022, the legislature adjourned for the year without taking any action to make any corrections in this particular area. This intentional lack of action by the legislature will continue to embolden criminal behavior, increase crime, and cause an overall reduction in public safety. The anti-pursuit law of 2021 has left Washington residents basically in a legal imbalance favoring criminals over victims. To put this by way of comparison for you, prior to House Bill 1054, Arlington PD experienced about 3 to 5 people eluding per year. That's how many people would take off from us when we attempted to stop them in a traffic stop. Just knowing that the law existed, that if they were caught, it was a felony and they would likely do jail time or go to prison, was such a deterrent that not many people would even try such a thing. Like I said, 3 to 5 times a year. Since the change in law, we are seeing 3 to 5 eluding cases per week, and we've had as many as 4 in one day. I know that traffic has been a constant conversation for the council, and this is one of those things that really hasn't helped us and just adds on to it, unfortunately. So in closing, what I'd like to say is that the 2022 legislature, they made some great improvements and corrections, but I still feel there's additional work for 2023, especially in the area of dangerous drugs and vehicle pursuits. As law enforcement officers, we have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution and enforce the rule of law. We continue to work within the constraints given us by the legislature, while also advocating for victims of crime who seem to have been forgotten in this dialogue. We remain consistent in recognizing the need for change, and we are supportive of balanced reforms, especially if they focus on principles that build public trust and bring justice to the victims of crimes. And with that, I will stand for questions.
That's it. Jonathan, you want to take off your screen share? We can see. There we go. Thank you. Great presentation, by the way. Jan? Jen, can you unmute yourself?
Doggone it, sorry. I don't know enough about drugs, but when you find someone with drugs, what's the amount that they would have to have on them in order for them to be arrested and it be a felony?
I'll be honest with you right now, it's unless they're driving a truckload, they're probably not going to be arrested. There would have to be other factors. They would have to be caught in the act of selling the drugs. We catch people with drugs almost on a daily basis, but under the new laws, it's virtually impossible for us to do anything with that. And it's surprising that we have this conversation with the public every day. A lot of people don't seem to know that that is the result of recent court decision and of recent legislative changes, we get calls with people see drug paraphernalia in the cars all the time, like at Safeway or some other local business. And they're surprised when we say, we're not coming to that because there's not really anything we can do with it. It's not illegal anymore to have that drug paraphernalia. And even if they had the drugs, we would give them a referral for services, which like I pointed out, nobody's taking advantage of those referrals.
So what can we as a council or individually do to try to get the legislators to look at it next year? First of all, I'd like to have a copy of your presentation, but speaking to the legislators, is that going to help? I thought it was going to help more this year, and apparently it didn't. It didn't.
I think we made tremendous ground this year of some reasonable compromise on holding police accountable and respecting victims. Drugs is one of those areas that seems to be controversial. And, I have a perspective from, over 2 decades in law enforcement that, when I explain to citizens, some of the only times we see people get treatment is when they go through drug court, and that is only the result of being arrested. There's this idea that, well, we're focused on low-level people. We should be focused on the big fish and the big dealers. The problem with that philosophy for us is you don't just go up and knock on the big dealer's door and say, hey, I want to buy drugs. You work your way up a stream. And a lot of times people aren't going to get the help themselves. Like, we have a team that's out there providing resources on a daily basis. And unfortunately, very few people take advantage of that. Sometimes they need some leverage to get them the help that they need. And let's be honest, most of them aren't clear-headed enough to take the help. Some people need that motivation of, it's jail or it's service. And again, I'm somewhat biased on this, but what I've seen in the recent changes is it's gone backwards. It hasn't gone forward. So I think there was an idea that let's give this a try and focus on services, but there's not enough services for one, and people will not take the services unless there's leverage. That's my opinion.
Definitely need that carrot and stick approach. You can have all the co-responder teams in the world, but unless there are consequences, there have to be consequences or people don't change.
So,
Heather and then Michelle.
Chief Ventura, you mentioned on your good slide that the third one down was effective March 17th. Do you recall when the first 2 on your slide became effective?
Let me see. I apologize.
No worries.
One took effect on March 4th. That's 1719 took effective March 4th. 1735 took effect March 4th. And let's see, 1310 took, is it 1310? No, that was the other bill. House Bill 2037 took effect on March 17th. And the retirement enhancement took effect on March 24th.
Thank you, Chief.
Michelle?
So Chief Ventura, possession of drugs, I think some people look at that and say that's a minor issue, but isn't it frequently affiliated with bigger crimes, robbery, people needing to steal in order to buy their drugs? So it could stem into so many different levels of criminal behavior. And if we're not even able to stop and take action on possession, then you're missing so many other opportunities out there that really impact communities in a negative manner. Is that the correct thinking on that?
I would say in all my years of experience as a student and a police officer, most serious crime and most crime in general has a drug nexus. It's not to say everything does, but the majority of things we deal with on a street level have a drug nexus. Also, to put it in another perspective, Washington State is the only state out of 50 states that does not have the same federal recognition for gun laws as the other 49 states do. So historically, in order to get federal intervention and have things prosecuted at a federal level, which is the gold standard of prosecution, you essentially would have to have drug charges in addition to the weapons charges in Washington state. So the reason why we seek federal prosecution when we can is because the penalties for federal prosecution are more severe than state level. So if you're sentenced to a crime at a federal level, you have to do 70% of your time before you're released. Unlike the state level, you could do less than half your time. But it's interesting to know that even on the federal level, guns don't mean anything because of the way Washington created its gun laws. So in the past, if you wanted a federal case, there had to be a drug nexus. And now we've taken away a lot of those tools to even create that drug nexus.
Thank you.
Well, Chief, I appreciate you coming here and clarifying for the council. It's another way that we can clarify for our citizens too, how, some bad lawmaking tied the hands of what we really are looking for the quality of life in our community. And I appreciate you and your agencies who advocated very hard this year for the changes that we did see. I feel hopeful that we can see more changes next year.
No, thank you for the opportunity to share this, and I'll share the PowerPoint presentation with you.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay, so next up is our monthly financial report, and we don't have Kristen Garcia with us tonight, so Paul's going to take us through that.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I'm standing in for Kristen tonight. She's taken a long weekend, a much needed break. So I'll go through her report with you. And I'll start out with sales tax. Our sales tax collection has been very strong. We've talked about that in recent times, and it remains strong. I did want to point out that our construction-related sales tax makes up the majority of what you're seeing with the healthy bottom line with sales tax. We, by our financial policies, do not spend construction-related sales tax on operations. It's considered one-time revenue. So we've been holding on to those funds, and we've built up a nice bottom line with it. My intention is to come to council with a capital request, a budget for that money that we've been able to save up. This is really a unique opportunity for the city because we've seen some construction related sales tax numbers that we just would not normally see, particularly with the Amazon construction. And I feel they could give us an opportunity to do some capital projects that we have not been able to do in the past. So the intent is to put those together and present them to council for discussion and consideration. I'd hope to have that done before the retreat, but at the retreat at the latest. I'm just waiting on some grant news because, of course, that's, that would help us tremendously if we can get some grants, particularly 169th is the one we're waiting to hear on. Because if we do get secure the grant that we're on the contingency funding list for that project, it would mean the difference between us doing one transportation project or two, or at least getting a second one started. So I want council to be able to look at those items holistically. So by that time, we'll know about the grants. We'll have the facilities capital plan put together and the new parks master plan. So we'll be able to look at that. Also with the sales tax, I did want to mention that when you do remove the construction related sales tax, our sales tax growth is still at about 8%, which is very strong. If you remember way back when we developed our 10-year financial outlook, we used a 4% cost over on our sales tax as a threshold that we needed to meet to be able to make growing expenses at normal increases. So we're well above that, and it's very strong. Kristen mentions in her report that we are a little bit behind on some utility tax revenue. Not sure why. It could be as simple as just some timing with the mail. end on utility taxes. So we have finished our last award of utility credit program. We gave a total of $11,107 out in phase 2 of that program. And our utility account delinquencies continue to go down. Property taxes, you'll notice if you look at property taxes, we have a little bit of a dip in 2022 compared to 2021. That's mostly due to us lowering our property tax rate because of North County. Again, sales tax is strong. Criminal justice tax follows sales tax, so we're also seeing larger numbers there. Our utility taxes show a little bit of an increase over what they were in 2021. That's pretty consistent with the growth that we've had in the city. And then our natural gas and our electric, again, is up, but we usually see those numbers a little higher during the winter months than the summer months. Telephone utility tax, we've talked about that kind of, over the last few years. You can see by looking at the chart that continues to decline, and that is just simply due to that you're seeing less and less people with landlines running into their homes. So that'll just continue to deteriorate. I did notice that gambling tax had increased quite a bit in 2022 for the first couple of months out of the year. I don't know if that's people getting out of their houses now that the indoor mask mandate is up, or and just excited to be out. I also have noticed that our hotels are full. We've got a lot of construction going on, so we have a lot of transient workers that are here for construction related jobs. So I think all that together has helped the gambling tax a little bit. Other than that, I think permits are on track with what we expect, along with our liquor excise tax. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have.
I think it looks good.
It is a good report. There's nothing in here that's concerning.
No.
I sent my questions to Kristen and she must have forwarded them to you because you answered several of them.
I'm sorry Kristen couldn't be here this evening, but she's enjoying her 30th wedding anniversary. Hand up.
Well, I was just looking at the very end, the fines and forfeitures, and saw that it's so much lower in 2022 for January, February, well, mostly January, than it was in 2021. Is that probably because of our hiring, in the process of hiring more police officers, and so less infractions being written?
Yes, definitely is related to the staffing issues.
Yeah, and that is the bulk of that line item. And I was noticing that too. And yes, it's certainly down from this year over last year when you look at the same time frame, and it's due to staffing levels.
So hopefully with the new officers coming on, we can see kind of a focus on helping to curb the dangerous driving that's happening.
You will on the police side. It'll be a slower process because we have to bring people up to speed and get them trained. But yes, it will help with that. And you can see by those numbers that our enforcement is just down and on par with our staffing.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, so hopefully we can stem the retirements so that we have enough staffing to do that. Thank you, Paul.
We'll be talking also in that with the traffic is on the different programs, different things we can do other than education and enforcement to hopefully curb some of the complaints that we're hearing for fast traffic and things. So,
Don?
Just a comment to Deborah's question and concerns. Also, too, I wonder how many infractions that are not being written because the driver's driving off, not stopping.
Well, what we heard from Jonathan, what he's reported to me is, yes, we are seeing.
Yep.
He reported to me that he personally has had experienced that where he wanted to stop someone for a traffic infraction and they did not stop.
Multi-pronged approach to the fixes.
Yeah.
We do some traffic fixes. They won't want to drive here like that, maybe, Don.
All right. Well, do you have any administrative report this evening?
Just to mention that next week we'll be back live in person. And so welcome back, and we'll have some extra sanitation and precautions in place to keep up keep everybody safe. So
Great. Thank you, Paul. We look forward to getting back to in-person meetings.
Mhm.
Are there any comments from council members this evening? Okay. Just one comment, and then we do have an executive session this evening. And we didn't have any public that wished to speak to the council this evening. Most of our legislators on the federal side things have opened up their applications for community projects, which is what used to be called earmarks. But they've opened that process back up and they're called community projects. And City of Arlington has submitted for 2 projects that qualify under the community projects funding. And one is the build out of the Smoky Point Park. Nearly $3 million for completing the park. We did get some money from the state legislature this year. And then the second project is a paving project that encompasses 3 parks, Haller, Rastra. Do you remember the third one? I don't remember the third one, but it would be redo the parking lots in those parks, repave them and make sure there's appropriate amount of spaces in the paving. So just submitted. Congress won't even be meeting on that until this fall. So Steve, I'll turn it over to you for executive session.
Yes, Madam Mayor, thank you. We have a need for an executive session to bring the council up to speed on the status of collective bargaining negotiations. I'm expecting a 20-minute time period for that executive session, and we're not asking council to take any action this evening once we reconvene.
And council, you'll be automatically moved over by our RT support. Maybe you just work.
sure.
So, just want to make sure everything's working. Okay.
we stop sharing?
No, go. Paul needs to speak though.
Our executive session is running longer. We're going to be in executive session for an additional 10 minutes. No action after executive session.
Stop sharing. We'll close the room. Everybody will come back here.
It feels like a heat on in here.
Yeah.
Goodness.
Yes, ma'am, I turned it up.
Thank you.
It was-
Council is not going to like coming back to having it that cold.
It was 60, 68 it was set to.
It was way too cold.
I gotta set up another room. Oh, I still have to wait 30 seconds.
We're missing Mike.
I do not see him in the list anymore. There's
He
Jan.
might have exited by mistake.
No, he's still in the breakout room.
Okay, well, we have a quorum here.
All in 12 seconds, he's gonna get kicked out.
Okay, we've returned from our executive session, but we hadn't finished in our executive session. So we are going to return to executive session for same reason, to discuss collective bargaining agreements for 15 minutes. So this time we'll recess back to executive session.
Okay.
Announce that all right.
Not sure.
What were the differences?
Thank you. Everybody has returned. And do we want to look at our agenda to see if there's anything you want on a consent agenda next week? And so it would just be items 1, 2, or 3. All right, we'll keep them all on the regular agenda then.
Okay, so does that complete us?
It does.
Okay, Madam Mayor, I move to adjourn.
Second.
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, meeting adjourned. Good night, everyone.
Night, all.
In person next week.
Yeah, see you next week.